Wife's shocking secret with her boss revealed. "So, Tracy, do you mind if I call you Tracy?" asked Dr. Karen, and without waiting for an answer, continued her question. "So, Tracy, what do you hope to gain from these sessions?" From the initial video counseling session, she knew in general terms what problems existed in Briley's marriage, but she wanted Tracy to articulate her goals and objectives. Making sure all parties are on the same page is a necessary first step in marriage counseling. This was her first session with Briley's spouses, Tracy and Jack. Although she had already communicated with Tracy via Zoom phone, this was the first time she had seen Tracy's husband. Jack Briley was a couple inches over 6 feet, lean, with the body of a runner, not someone who spent hours in the gym. Clean-shaven with thick blonde hair slicked back behind his collar. Tracy Briley was shorter in stature, 55 or 6, and Karen guessed her weight to be in the range of 125 pounds. She too had blonde hair, which today was tucked into a ponytail ending between her shoulder blades, medium-sized breasts and stunning legs, which were shown off by a black pencil skirt and heeled shoes. The tanned legs were the legs of an athlete, muscular calves that were perfectly accentuated by the 4-inch heels. "Since I returned to work 6 months ago, my husband has become controlling and emotionally abusive. He is constantly trying to violate my right to privacy. I didn't work for several years so I could stay home, and now that our girls are in school, I've started working again. Jack has become insanely jealous, and his controlling and manipulative behavior is out of control. My goal in marriage counseling is to convince Jack that he has nothing to worry about and that his controlling behavior has to stop." Karen watched Jack's face as his wife described the problem from her perspective. His face was inexpressive and almost detached as his wife spoke. Karen could easily picture him as a controlling asshole. "Thank you, Tracy. Jack, let's break down what Tracy said. Tell me, what do you see as the problem in your marriage?" Jack Briley met Karen's gaze and then shifted his eyes to his wife. He then spoke in an even, unemotional tone. "My wife is having an emotional affair with her boss. I want her to quit her job and never have contact with him again." Tracy rolled her eyes in disgust. "Do you see what I'm talking about? I get the same crap day in and day out, and I'm sick from this." Tracy spat out the last phrase with a mixture of anger and frustration. Karen turned to Jack. "That's a very harsh accusation, Jack. I have a couple of questions for you. Why do you think her relationship with her boss is an affair, and what proof do you have?" Jack leaned back in his chair and looked first at Tracy and then at the marriage counselor. "I'll answer that. But first I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind. Tracy chose you and met with you, but I haven't had a chance to talk to you." Karen gave him an appraising look. "You can ask me a couple questions. If they seem inappropriate, I'll just refuse to answer them." "Fair enough." Jack met Karen's gaze again. "Are you married?" "No, I'm not married," Karen replied. "Have you ever been married?" Karen was generally uncomfortable talking about her personal life, but she also knew that the hallmark of a good counselor was the ability to be open and vulnerable with clients, to some extent. "Yes, I was married, but I've been divorced for several years now." Karen was growing increasingly uncomfortable with this way of putting the question. "Why did you get divorced?" Well, now the questions have become completely inappropriate, Karen thought to herself. Before Karen could answer, Jack asked the next question. "Was there adultery?" "My marriage has nothing to do with your marriage. Your marriage and my marriage are in no way similar, and the breakup of my marriage is not something we will discuss further." Karen realized there was no anger or compassion in her words. She needed to get a grip on her emotions. Why did Jack Briley need to pry into this sore spot? "I'll take that as a yes," Jack replied. "Yes, there was cheating," Karen said, her lips pressed into a pale, thin, hard line. "Thank you for your candor," Jack replied. I say it's an emotional affair because not only do they see each other all day at work, but they text all the time in the evenings and on weekends. Every time we leave the house, she spends most of the time on the phone with her boss. She refuses to show me her texts and turns her phone away from me so I can't see what she's doing. She sleeps with her phone under her pillow and takes it into the bathroom with her. We haven't had sex in 3 months, and if she's not sleeping with her boss now, I know she'll be sleeping with him soon. Karen looked at Tracy appraisingly. This was a very different twist to the story Tracy had told her at Zoom. Tracy, is Jack being truthful? The look of anger and disgust reappeared on Tracy's face. No, I correspond with a lot of people. I have family and friends I exchange messages with. He's just sad and pathetic. He wants to control me and keep me from having friends. Jack, do you have any proof of what you're accusing Tracy of? Jack reached into the backpack he'd set on the floor when he took his seat at the beginning of the session. He pulled out several pages and held them out to Karen. What am I looking at? Asked Karen. This is our phone bill from 4 months ago. If you look at page 4, that's where Tracy's cell phone information starts. It ends on page 5. You can count it if you want, but she texted a little over 300 messages that month. Mostly to me, her sisters, and her mom. What are you doing, Jack? You're proving me right, Tracy said. Up until now, she had been sitting in silence, but Jack was starting to piss her off with his antics. Jack reached into his backpack and pulled out another document, noticeably thicker. This is our phone bill from last month. Jack held out the pages to Karen. Tracy's cell phone detail starts on page 4, same as the other page. Can you tell me which page it ends on? Karen flipped through the pages and looked up in surprise. Page 12. This bill has 7 more pages of text than the other bill you showed me. That's right, Jack said. Now look at the phone numbers. It's almost all the same numbers, Karen replied. It looks like thousands of messages to the same number. Karen turned to Tracy. Tracy? I'm texting my boss. So what's the big deal? We have a very good relationship and he understands me. But I'm not cheating on you. I'm not having an affair, yelled Tracy at Jack. Karen looked at Jack, whose expression was the opposite of Tracy's. While she was agitated and emotional, he was calm and almost serene in his demeanor. Prove it, Jack said. That statement made both Tracy and Karen freeze in place. It wasn't up to Tracy to prove that she wasn't having an affair. It was up to Jack to prove that she was having an affair. How can I prove that I'm not doing something? Asked Tracy. You can't prove a negative. Asking me to do that is as ridiculous as assuming I'm having an affair. You can prove it and I'll be satisfied, Jack said, holding out his hand. All you have to do is let me read your messages. Tracy looked at Karen. Can you imagine what I have to deal with? This is what I meant when I said I had no personal life. She rolled her eyes at Jack. Okay. Do you want to read my messages? Tracy reached into her purse and pulled out her iPhone. Go ahead. After this, you can apologize to me and leave this ridiculous topic. Unlocking the screen, she handed the phone to Jack. Jack reached into his backpack and pulled out his laptop and cable. He plugged one end of the cable into Tracy's iPhone and the other end into the laptop. Then he opened the laptop. What are you doing? Asked Tracy. Her face reflected panic. I bought an iPhone recovery program. It will recover all the deleted texts, photos, and videos. Jack pressed a couple buttons on his laptop and looked at the screen. No! Screamed Tracy and rushed to her phone, snatching it from Jack. She ripped the phone out of his hands and with it the synchronization cable. Karen was amazed at Tracy's sudden reaction. Jack seemed to have expected it. I will not have you violating my privacy, shouted Tracy. Tracy, Karen said softly, this isn't good for you. It gives the impression that you're hiding something. I have a right to my privacy. She looked at Jack. I'm your wife. You have to trust me. Karen looked at Jack. She's right about that. If you don't trust her, then you don't have a marriage. Everyone deserves their own personal space. Jack shifted his gaze from Karen to Tracy and then back to Karen. Do you know the difference between privacy and secrecy? I don't know, Jack. Why don't you explain it to us? Tracy said with a vaguely aggressive tone. In a marriage, everyone has a right to privacy. You want to go to the bathroom behind a closed door? That's personal space. You want to keep a diary or journal? That's personal space. You see, privacy doesn't affect marriage. It doesn't help the marriage or hurt the marriage. Privacy has a completely neutral effect on marriage. You can't say the same thing about secrecy. If you have relationships and conversations with members of the opposite sex, but you exclude your spouse from them, then you have gone beyond privacy and are now leading a secret life. Secrecy hurts a marriage. You know as well as I do that the texts you exchange with your boss are hurting me and hurting our marriage. That's why you won't let me see them. You know that if I see what you both say and do, I will file for divorce. Tears ran down Tracy's face. That's not true. Some of our communications may be a little over the line, but I haven't cheated on you. And I'm not going to cheat on you. Tracy sobbed softly. Where does that leave us, Jack? Karen asked. The counseling goals you outlined at the beginning of our session left no room for compromise. Are you going to forbid Tracy from working? You mean set rules? Jack shook his head. She's an adult. As with the privacy and secrecy issue, Jack had another question for the counselor. Do you know the difference between rules and boundaries? Karen nodded. I know, but why don't you tell us what you're thinking? Rules are what you set for other people. You have to do this or you can't do that. Setting rules for children is one thing, but you can't set rules for adults. What you can do is set boundaries for yourself and come up with consequences when someone breaks them. For example, I don't feel bad when you do that. If you continue to make me uncomfortable, there will be consequences. You see, boundaries are your own protection. What are you saying, Jack? Tracy had stopped crying, but her face was still wet with tears. The same thing I said at the beginning. You're continuing to be in this job, and your relationship with your boss makes me feel unsafe in our marriage and uncomfortable in our relationship. If you continue to make me feel unsafe and uncomfortable, there will be consequences. Tracy and Karen looked at each other and then at Jack. You can't make me quit my job, Tracy said. Don't even try, Jack said. That would be a rule, and I'm not making any rules for you. But if I don't quit, there will be consequences like you said. That's right, Jack replied. How is that not a rule? You're imposing on me a decision you made yourself, exclaimed Tracy with annoyance. I don't see it that way. You have a choice. Continue with actions that make me feel unsafe and uncomfortable, or stop those actions to make me feel safe and comfortable. The choice is entirely up to you. What will the consequences be? Asked Karen. Excuse me? Replied Jack. You've outlined your boundaries and said there will be consequences for violating them. I think Tracy needs to know the consequences for stepping over your boundaries. Why, so she can do a cost-benefit analysis of violating my boundaries? So she can decide if it's worth the juice? Jack shook his head. It doesn't work that way. She just has to know there will be consequences. Besides, even if she knew in advance what the consequences would be, do you think that would stop her? Yes, it would have stopped her, Tracy said. She stopped crying and wiped her face. What is the harshest punishment the law can give for a crime? Asked Jack. The death penalty? I don't think you could kill me for crossing the so-called border, laughed Tracy. Jack smiled unhappily. I wouldn't, even if you deserved it. But you're right about the death penalty. The death penalty has already been handed down for some crimes, and yet people continue to commit these crimes. Knowing in advance what the consequences of these crimes are, criminals don't seem to commit them. They just try to cover up the crime better. So no, I'm not going to tell you the consequences of crossing my borders. What kind of internet acronym is that? Have sex and find out, Tracy muttered. We don't have any more time for today, so on that pleasant note, we'll end today's session. We have another session scheduled in 2 weeks. I have a very good feeling about what we accomplished today. That was how Karen usually ended a session. Truth be told, she had no idea what Jack was thinking. Tracy stood up, smiling at her husband, but Jack only looked at her sadly and shook his head. You missed a really good session 2 weeks ago, Karen said. Tracy said you had to go out of town suddenly on business. I told him we had a very productive meeting, Tracy replied to Karen. I feel much better about our marriage in the future. Jack looked even more relaxed in that session than he had in the previous one. In that session, he looked sad and resigned. In this session, he was almost cheerful. This session is going to be a good one, Karen thought. Tracy began. Doctor, Karen and I were talking about transparency and how important it is in a marriage. Tracy thrust her cell phone toward Jack. You can look through it and retrieve my messages, Tracy said. Thanks, Tracy, Jack grinned. That won't be necessary. I'm sure you've already done a factory reset on your phone. You certainly look much happier than you did at our last session, Karen said. The way the session ended had me really worried about you. Jack brushed off her concerns. I'm in a much better state of mind now than I was then. He's been much calmer and happier since he came home from his business trip out of town, Tracy said. I think the trip did him good. And me, Tracy said cheerfully. You both look much happier today. I don't think either of you were smiling during our last session together, Karen said. She has a beautiful smile, doesn't she? Jack asked. Her smile just lights up the room. Karen nodded at Tracy's happily smiling face. Her dazzling smile confirmed Jack's compliment. I always like to make her smile. I have probably 1,000 pictures of a smiling Tracy on my phone. Let me show you my favorite picture. It's Tracy's happiest smile. Jack pulled out his phone and held it up to his eyes so they could see the picture. It was a picture of a smiling Tracy. She looked radiant. Her shining eyes expressed the joy she had for life, and her laughing eyes made it clear that this was a person completely content with her life. Jack raised his eyes to Tracy. Do you remember this picture, darling? You look so happy in that picture. I don't remember exactly where it was taken, Tracy replied, making a pinching gesture with her thumb and forefinger. Can you shrink it down? You bet, Jack said. Still holding his phone so that it was facing Tracy and Karen, Jack slowly made a pinch gesture on the screen. Karen and Tracy watched as Tracy's picture began to shrink as the background took shape. As Tracy shrank, it could be realized that she was a few feet in front of the door. As Tracy continued to shrink, a hand appeared, resting on the doorknob. As Tracy continued to shrink, a full image of the person behind her formed. Baby, let me explain, said Tracy. Her sobs soon turned to hyperventilation as she began to realize what she was seeing. Jack paid no attention to her as he continued to squeeze the screen of his phone. Apparently, it was Tracy leaving the motel room with a man. Tracy groaned. Her boss? Asked Karen sadly. You have one, said Jack. And look at the time. 4 hours after her session with you. Jack made a flicking gesture at the phone screen. It was another picture of Tracy in front of the motel door, this time entering. Look at the timestamp, Jack said. Less than an hour after your session with her ended, she's in a motel room with the man she said she'd never cheat on me. Nice work, marriage counselor. I don't think you'll get a thank you for saving her. Tracy groaned even louder upon hearing that. I'm so sorry, baby. We can fix this. This doesn't mean anything. I'll quit my job. We can work on saving our marriage. Jack smiled and shook his head. Those consequences you wanted to know about? Guess what they are? I'm going to divorce you. That goes without saying. I don't want you to quit your job anymore. You need the income. Jack held out a business card to Tracy. This is the contact information for my lawyers. You need to find yourself a lawyer and give him my attorney's information. Before I came here, I packed up all your things and took them to your parents' house. They aren't thrilled with you, but they agreed that you could stay with them. The house belonged to me before the wedding, so it won't be part of the agreement. And I don't want you living there. After today, I never want to see you again." As Jack stood up and walked toward the door, Tracy went into a complete stupor. Karen looked like she was in shock. "Are you going to do something to your wife?" Jack shook his head. "You mean my soon-to-be ex-wife? No, that's your problem. You had your chance to hold her accountable, but you didn't take it. You made such a strong impression on her at the last session that she dumped you and went and cheated on me immediately. By the way, I found out that when you said your marriage broke up because of infidelity, it was actually your infidelity and not your husband's. I bring this up because I don't think marriage counseling is right for you." Jack stood up and walked toward the exit of the office. He looked at Tracy. She was sitting on the floor with her arms wrapped around herself and rocking back and forth, repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." He shook his head at this sad scene and walked out the door. The end.